Welcome to 8,000 Miles to TapTown. My name is Finbar and this is Jim Meyer, Super Connector. So far on this show, we've talked to artists, inventors, instrument makers from all over the world. We've talked to people in the US, in England, in Australia, in Germany, in Japan, Philippines. List goes on and on and on. Well, today we go to Canada and we talk to Jim Meyer. Jim started off playing classical piano at an early age and got involved in the 70s prog rock bass in his teens. Then he found a Chapman Stick. And his life, like a lot of these other people that we've been talking to on the show, changed forever. Jim started trying to look for resources, learning, like a lot of people back in the day when there was very, very limited resources. And then he sort of triggered onto, by going to some other seminars, that the seminars were the thing to do to bring people together. And since then, since the early 2000s, Jim has been the curator of the Vancouver Stick seminars. He's been bringing people together from all over the world to communicate, to collaborate, to learn, and to sort of perform using these incredible instruments. On today's episode, we talked to Jim about a whole range of stuff, from his playing style, his rigs, his different instruments, and the journey of life being a Chapman Stick player. It was a great episode. I really loved talking to this legend. I hope you like it as much as I do. Jim Meyer. So Jim, awesome to have you on the show, buddy. Thank you so much for joining me all the way over from Vancouver. It's awesome to have you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Finn. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, I just wanted to say, as somebody that organizes something specifically for stick players, I really want to thank you for doing this, because I've learned a lot. I think what I've really learned from doing my own stick seminars is you get a group of tappers or stick players together and just let them talk. And a lot of great stuff comes out of that. And in watching your shows, it's the same thing. You get a few people together and let them talk about what they're doing. For those of us that are trying to advance with the instrument, there's a ton of great stuff that comes out of that. So thanks so much for making a video series that is going to help a lot of folks out, I'm sure.
Well, mate, look, just like yourself, you know, you bring people together in these seminars and you watch this evolve. For me, I'm doing this basically out of selfish, that I just love this instrument. And for me, it's blown my mind that I've spent all of these years playing, composing, and writing and recording music. And it's only in the last real couple of years I've got into it. And it's just taken my whole musicianship to a whole new level. And it's like, and so I'm naturally a little bit sort of over the top, which is just who I am. But no, I love things.
Another thing that I wanted to say to you specifically is that I'm kind of following your progress on, I guess, stick originally, but now you're into the war guitar. And I have to say, I personally was not the quickest study. I'm kind of a slow learner on the instrument. You are way ahead of the curve, my friend. You really seem to just go right to it. And, you know, we're all different. I know a few stick players like that. Rodrigo, I'm thinking of you. I met a fellow from Portugal who is an upright, professional upright bass player in both jazz and classical. So accomplished musician, but somebody put a stick in his hands, and months later he's making videos, and that was not me. Some people just dive in. I think you're one of them. I'm a little more of the slow and steady, I guess. But yeah, pretty impressive what you've done so far.
Well, for me, it's like when I look at the stick or the war guitar or any tap instrument, I just see a pattern. And you know, when you work out what the patterns are, if you've got some technique, for me, getting an understanding of the fingerboard and how it's mapped, actually forgetting all the scales and all the techniques. Once you've got that, to me, it's like the puzzle is starting to unencrypt really what this thing is about. And I like to, I'm very much, I go to the end and try and reverse engineer things. So once I've mapped something, then it becomes easier for me. So I've spent quite a bit of time trying to map the fingerboard and understand the patterns and how they relate to each other. So I don't know, that's just the way I like it. But yeah, no, I'm really blown away.
I never thought of the way you said reverse engineer, but I think I'm kind of the same way. I've heard you speak before about music theory, and obviously it's super important. But a lot of people just put the instrument on and play and figure out later what it was they just did. And that is a little bit reverse engineering. Just create something on the instrument. And there is clearly benefits from going back and figuring out, okay, what was I doing from a music theory perspective? Because then I can use that later or try to avoid doing the same thing over and over or whatever. But I like that idea of reverse engineering. I'll use that at the next stick seminar.
Well, yeah. So, like, you know, I used to teach at the conservatorium here in Australia, and you know, instrumental major and jazz harmony and compositional major and all that sort of stuff. And it's all theory-based stuff. But I used to teach a lot of shred sort of guitar because because I like that and the kids like that. But for me, it's that these are all tools in the tool shed, and being able to sort of pull them out and assemble them in different orders. And for me, that's the creative thing. If you've got a bit of theory and a bit of unique things where you don't know what you're doing and learning from someone else, to me, that's the beautiful soup of the instrument. But for me, when I went from a guitar, which was very limiting to me, but I didn't know it at the time, I just was, I could spend another 5 years trying to get a little bit better at my fusion playing or something. But when I got this, it was like, now I'm into composition land, and I can actually see things working over each other and what polychords mean. And, odd time signatures now aren't anything fancy. They're just everything just flows together. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just like you, I guess. It's sort of, reading your bio, like let's get into that, because, like, I just love these backstories about, this you started on classical piano, is that right? And then you got into the prog thing with bass. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So classical music is how I learned music. I was not at a conservatory, but that's how I learned the piano keyboard. Even now, if somebody says, A minor 11, I picture a keyboard in my mind, even though I'm a stick player, because it just laying it out linearly from a theory perspective. Oh, okay, we're going to play these notes, So that the keyboard is just always going to be the core for me. Even though I'm not a good keyboard player, it just makes sense to me. And for composing, that just works well. And I think for the stick too, as soon as I got the stick, and I was the same way as a bass player, I just want to write stuff. As a bass player, it was maybe a bass line that isn't the bass line for this cover tune, or there were times where I was working with bands that wrote original music, and now you have to come up with a bass line. I just love doing that. And then the stick comes along. There's just so many options. Well, you say guitar was limiting. Bass was limiting for me because 4 strings, and it's only one part. But now suddenly with the stick, you can instantly play 2 parts at once. I think a lot of us are trying to play 3 parts at once. I had a conversation with Emmett about that, and I think that's the way that Emmett envisioned the instrument is you do something on the very low bass strings and something on the melody strings, and then something else on the higher bass strings with other fingers, which really is an accompaniment. And it is instantly, it's 3 different parts. And if you keep them relatively simple, you can play 3 parts at once. That's amazing. So if you're composing and trying to layer things, well, that's 3 right there. You record that. Now the second time through, you've got something that's 4 or 5 layers already. And that's very fast, very impossible to do on my 4-string bass. And it just, I think the trying to write on the instrument is really what drew me into it. Like, there was Emmett's book, and in the mid-90s, Greg Howard's stick book, and Steve Adelson's got a thing, but when I first started, it was Emmett's freehands, which I have to say may have gone over my head a little bit.
Yeah, I
So
remember
it was
seeing.
really just, all right, how does this work? And that's something that struck me just kind of getting ready to chat with you. There's a lot of things on the stick that your immediate impression is, well, that's weird. And then, you put your time in, and which is the most important thing for me. You put your time in, things are going to come out okay. And then one day, it's like, oh, that makes sense now. And for me, one of the revelations was the inverted fifths tuning in the left hand. So as a bass player, it's like, okay, why are the strings backwards, and why are they not in fourths? And you just kind of grunt through. And first of all, right away for any bass player, you play different lines than you would ever play on a bass because you have to.
Yeah.
And then in a moment you think, well, if you're going to play root and five and they happen to be right next to each other, that's mighty convenient. And then all of a sudden you realize, well, with the fifths tuning, you can play chord voicings that have a real foundation bottom end, and then chord tones or whatever that are maybe 2 octaves higher.
Yeah.
Without stretching or even moving your hand.
Yeah.
I just think, that it's just a series of these aha moments of like, I think I know why Emmett tuned it this way.
Yeah.
Or I think I know why it's divided into 2 halves. And it may be that what I'm thinking has absolutely nothing to do with what Emmett was thinking, but it's still that after time, it starts to make sense. And then things really pick up. I know, like I said, I started out pretty slow. Going from 0 to like 10 miles an hour took me years. But once something clicked, then the instrument is amazing. It just seems like you can do anything with it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's mind blowing. But so, how did you go from was that just you've gone from classical piano and then you got into the whole bass, rock, prog sort of thing? Was it when you got into that bass, did you still visualize, or did you still think about chords, or from a left hand of the piano type thing, or was that just
it's funny, I've been thinking about this when I was first taking grade 1 classical piano lessons. Even when you're doing rudimentary exercises, every now and then they'll move the melody to the left hand, and I remember as a kid thinking, that's awesome. It was very often in classical music, it might be a slightly simpler version of the melody, but like, let's let the left hand do something. And it just always drew me to that. And when when I was a teenager and friends were kind of getting together wanting to do music, I wasn't going to drag my piano around. And it just struck me that, well, I like this low end. It was actually a friend of mine who was a guitar player said, maybe you should play bass. And I got a Fender Tele bass, which I wish I still had to this day. I love that Tele bass. And I just dove in. I was partly trying to figure out what Chris Squire was doing, and partly trying to figure out what Geddy Lee was doing, and then partly just trying to figure out what I could do with this thing. And I don't know. I think my ear just went there. And I would say now I'm a stick player, but I'm really a bass player. I think when I compose, I tend to start with the bottom end. And if I'm playing something that's really making people move, it's the bass side that's doing that. So I know I think like a bass player. If you put a guitar on me, I'm sure you can appreciate this. I sound like a bass player playing a guitar. Yeah. So bass it just really made sense to me. And then, as a teenager, when I started following, the amazing guys that were around in the 70s, I always thought John Entwistle was one of the most underrated bass players. But, put headphones on and try to listen to what the bass player is doing. I was like, that's what I want to do. And then, I played in bands for a long time. And around the time the stick showed up in my life, it was more of I think I'm going to be a solo performer now. And I don't know a lot of solo 4-string bass players running around. So the stick just really seemed to lend itself to that. And I'd say most of what I do is either solo or with a drummer percussionist. And I really like that format. I mean, it lets me be in control. But if anything goes wrong, I don't let the drummer have a microphone, so then I can blame him for all the mistakes, and that's very convenient.
Yeah, like I really love what you said about the 3 parts. For me, when I got into the stick, and now with my war guitar, I've always been, as a guitar player, I've always been focused on, I love drummers as a guitar player. Like I love rhythms and I love phrasing. And even with the guitar, you can do all these crazy fast runs and stuff like that. But it's how do you slide things out where you're saying something with the instrument? And a lot of what I'm really gravitated towards are dead notes and little things in the groove that actually turns a flurry of notes into something that is musical, you know. And for me, when I got onto the touch style instrument, you know, like I spent years developing my pick technique and getting all my speed and all that clean, and then moving that to my right hand and then starting to think about the interplay of both hands as two instruments or as one instrument where it's all coming together. And the dead notes for me was like, that's my third instrument there, is the percussiveness of how I'm hitting and how hard and the dynamics of the note, and being able to just hear that the different types of touch generate different types of sounds. It's just without any distortion or any effects or anything. It's just like, man, this thing is just incredible. I can actually treat it like, in a way, like a drum as well, or you know, the interplay between the two hands, creating the two rhythms. For me, it just blew my mind that, wow, I can do all of this on one instrument. You know, it's just amazing.
Yeah, and I think something that's come up in some of your other interviews as well. There's no rule book.
Mm.
No one knows how to play the stick from watching someone else when they were a kid. So I think musicians should be creative and trying to push the boundary and all that. But with the stick, you kind of have no choice, you know.
Yeah,
If
that's right.
something happens, I've on all of our instruments, if you play on the highest string and you hit a little hard and you're not quite coming down vertically, you can slide the string off the edge of the fret and you get a really okay. Can you make a song out of that? And yeah, one of my stick player buds from Argentina did exactly that. And in the performance, he hit that crazy sound consistently. And
Mm.
you think, I don't think a guitar player would ever even think of that.
Yeah.
But on the stick, it's like, well, okay, nobody's done this before. Let's see what happens. And you're talking about ghost notes. There's a lot of ways to play ghost notes or dead notes or muted notes. You know, tape on the bottom of the string, lay your hand against, you know, all this stuff. And it's just all stuff that the guys that I learned from, they were experimenting 10 years before me and just, okay, what can you do? What happens if you hit it with your hand? What if you go, you know, this way? What if you play with your thumbs? And it's sort of set the stage for people that come after, like myself or all the young kids now. Yeah, do it. No, nobody said you can't, so go for it. And
Mm.
it's just amazing at a stick seminar, if you've got 20, 25 stick players at the same weekend event, the funnest thing for me is you're going to see probably 15 different styles of how to approach playing the stick, from classical music to singer-songwriters. And that always blows me away, that somebody can play what I'm playing and then sing on top of it, you
Mm.
know, to prog guys, to people who are solo, people who are playing a role in a band. It's just all over the place, and it's so fun. Stick night up here is the funnest night because you never know what's next. And by the end of the night, you've really heard quite a variety of styles.
Well, it's a thing that, as you were talking, that I had a visualization of is, in a lot of ways, I think a lot of contemporary music these days has gone into, well, at least I mean, talking for myself here, it's gone into, how can I sound like someone else? You've got game shows on television where the definition of a good instrumentalist or vocalist is if they can copy someone else. And you know, for me, it's pretty boring. And what I love about these instruments, and you were talking about the word experimentation, is it's the happy accidents that there's the exploration of not knowing what you're doing, in a way, is the catalyst for you to creating your own voice and to find things, you know. And yeah, I've talked about this on other episodes, but it is just, for me, that is so amazing to be able to keep exploring. I love learning. I love change. I get that a lot of people don't, but I don't think anyone that's even attempted to try this instrument has come at it from a fixed mindset, because it's already different to start with. So, you know, what I love to do, and what part of this whole episode was to try and do, is for this community to bring us all together, whatever instrument we play or whatever style we play, but also for those thinking about it who are maybe a little bit frustrated with their musical journey and want to go further, you know, is to try and break this psychological barrier between this thing that looks really confusing, but, you know, and trying to say to them, hey, you know, It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of experimentation. You don't have to be great straight away. It's part of it is finding your voice. So I love it when you talk about experimentation because that really resonates with me.
Well, one of the things I wanted to chat about is not only the seminars, but the whole idea of how do you learn to play this thing? And for me, like I said, there was one book when I started, and that was it. There were no teachers here. There were no stick players here that I knew about, except for one fellow that I met in the late '80s, and I might talk about him a bit more. But you're kind of isolated all alone. And for me, there's another fellow here in Vancouver, Nathan Aswell, who did a couple of stick seminars in the '90s when I really couldn't play. I owned a used instrument, but I couldn't really play. And I attended those. And it was so eye-opening, not because there's a teacher standing there telling you all the things you should be doing, but there were a lot of people there who were on the same journey I was, some kind of right where I was and some quite a bit farther down the road. But I could see how other people held the instrument. And I know that sounds crazy because with guitar, you put the strap on and there it is. But with the stick, is it vertical? Emmett used to say 30 degrees. Some people play it this way. You don't even know how to wear it. And you look around the room going, oh, okay, that might work for me. And then there's a stick night. And usually we're pretty inclusive with stick night. There may be somebody like this is their first public performance. And then there'll be somebody like Don Schiff or something that's like way at the other end. Yeah. And it's really nice to see, oh, okay, that's a beginner guy, but I get what he's doing. I think I might give that a shot. Or, somebody that's playing strictly chords in the left hand. And then the next guy comes up and he's playing bass lines in the left hand. And it's like, oh, wow, there's really no limit here. And yeah, and I think getting the groups of musicians together, I think is good for anybody. But for stick players, to see other people play the instrument, cover tunes or originals or whatever it is they're doing, that really helped me a lot. There's just a physical thing about how do you interact with it that I was kind of clueless about at the very beginning. And those two '90s seminars, Greg Howard was up here, Don Schiff was up here, a war guitar player named Teed Rockwell. I don't know if you know Teed or not. Yeah. It just... It clarified a lot of the options for me. And it just, okay, let me try this. Okay, that didn't work. Well, let me try this. There's like 50 things you see at a stick weekend that can keep you busy for months at home. And I don't know of any substitution. I know there's more and more online videos of stick players doing a variety of things. But putting them all in one room, I think that's the way to do it.
Was it 2002, 2003 when you first started the first Vancouver Stick?
That's right. I had been to those two seminars, and then I realized this is the way for me to learn. And I will say I learned to play the stick by going to stick seminars. So for me, that was, Montreal, San Diego, Charlottesville, Virginia, Germany, Switzerland, I've been to Spain, any place I could go where I thought it would help me. And then after a while, I realized, well, that's kind of expensive. What if I did one here? And really, it was a conversation with Greg Howard, who I'd known for a few years. Right. He said, yeah, you should just do a Vancouver seminar. And 6 months later was the first Vancouver seminar. So wow. It's just, and I have to say, it's the funnest week of the year. I look forward to it every year. As you might imagine, it's a lot of logistics getting something like that to happen. Sure. But when everybody shows up, it's the most fun. It's the most musical week. It's just really great.
So when is it on 2022? When's that all happening?
This year we've gone from started out in Vancouver, but right away we kind of did more of a retreat thing. And we've done a lot on the Gulf Islands just off the coast here. We've done a number of seminars in sort of a retreat kind of environment where everybody's in the same place. We share meals, we share, we're sleeping in the same dorm, all that. Mm-hmm. So I really prefer those, but, COVID and whatnot, I think logistically it makes sense to stay here in Vancouver, which is what we did this year. So yeah, August 22nd, I think is when we start here in Vancouver. And that includes 3 nights of performing downtown. So there'll be a variety of people playing at those shows. So yeah, it'll be fun.
Oh, that's amazing. So people could turn up, and there's master classes, or people just all performing, or is it just a mixture of
We've
everything?
kind of morphed over the years. In the early 2000s, it was kind of leader-led instruction.
Right.
And when there was enough students, then it was like, okay, let's put the beginners in one group and put the intermediates in another group so that everybody's kind of getting something a little bit tailored for them. Motivated self-interest. That was great for me because I was learning the instrument. And as I kind of became more comfortable with it, I was just reflecting on this. The seminar kind of morphed more into a performance thing. So we have instruction, which is really more like sharing now because, well, we do have the instructors this year will be Greg Howard and Don Schiff joining myself.
Okay.
So yeah, they'll be presenting material, but a lot of it is going to be question and answer.
Right.
And that's a really nice format because everybody can kind of express what they're struggling with. And sometimes it's the guy sitting next to you that has a suggestion that's more appropriate to yourself than maybe the professional touring musician who's here because you're not quite ready for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think sharing is the big thing. Oh, and what I was going to get is we've been talking about music and music theory. Gear is a whole other realm. Yeah. And if you're a stick player, not necessarily trying to play clean on both sides, but trying to look for a variety of sounds, because you tap, it effects pedals don't sound the same when you tap than they do when you pick. So now you're starting that venture all by yourself again too. And we've kind of started several years ago talking about gear at the seminar, and not to say here's a gadget and here's how it works, but like, okay, you're a stick player. Do you compress the bass side? It depends on, what pickup are you using? Do you want to do a lot of effects? Do you want to add effects on the bass side or just the melody side? And then, pedal boards start coming out and that topic is endless, of course, but you can really get a lot of perspective by watching, okay, this guy uses that thing and he's got tube overdrives and digital delays, but this guy is using like all analog and, where does my ear go? Which one do I like better? And yeah, even from a gear perspective, it's
yeah, that's a really good point. I know. Look, I've got a bunch of gear behind me. I've got beautiful old valve gear. I've got amazing effects processors, and my studio is all sound grid. It's all Ethernet, sync over Ethernet. It's all 96K, 24-bit, all that sort of stuff. But I still find at least with my war guitar, I'm running into a Demeter valve preamp for the bass, and I'm running an Avalon for the melody side, and then I run in through all my parallel effects. But it's the nuances. I find if I run into just pedals, I lose so much dynamic range. Then I've obviously got big rack gear, but it changes your sound so much. It's like unbelievable the difference just having. I guess it does with guitar, but not to the same level because you've got so much dynamic range on these things,
And we're usually wrestling with two separate rigs, I mean, usually the bass side is a bit simpler, but you want the bass to stand out, but have character and not interfere with the other hand. I mean, it really is a complex equation to sort that all out. So yeah, spend years all by yourself or start chatting with other stick players and see what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, it's certainly I love the journey. It's like Tomb Raider for me. There's all these things coming at you, and you got to try and solve them. And then it's like, what's this? And I got to unpack this and figure this out. But that's part of where all the fun is, right?
Oh yeah.
Even getting strings.
One of the other fun things for beginner stick players, well, really for any stick player, when you're trying to learn something and you hit the wrong string, and it dawns on you that it actually sounds better than the one you were aiming for. I think the inverted fifths and fourths tuning lends itself to a lot of happy mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of all of us. Maybe on the bass side, especially because generally we're not accustomed to the fifth tuning, and it's easy to make mistakes, but that mistake actually sounds really good. So now that's part of the song.
Yeah. No, it's I found when I got my stick, one of my biggest challenges was getting it set up the way I wanted it, because all my guitars, I've been playing for so long, all my guitars are all either hand built and I'm constantly tweaking them just to get, because I play so low anyway. I do a lot of 8-finger tapping on guitar. And then when I got my stick, I started coming at it from the approach of, I got a rail board, and it just didn't feel right, the setup, and I knew I could get it better, but it was a whole new way to approach the instrument. So Greg helped me with my grand stick, working on it on the truss rod, because it was so foreign to me, the way to set up these instruments. Finally got it, close, but just that, if you're used to setting up your instruments, it's sort of, that can make, again, such a big difference to your acceleration of your playing, having something that's easy to play, like on any instrument, at least that's what I think anyway.
Well, it's been kind of fun now. I mean, we're all missing Emmett, having passed at the beginning of last month, but when he was always innovating. And the first instrument I bought was a used ironwood 10-string.
Wow, that's
from, I think it was built in '84, is what
right.
They told me. Well, that was prior to adjustable anything. It didn't have a truss rod. It didn't have the intonation adjustments at the bottom, and you get the right strings for it and you play it, and that's it. And it's been interesting, even for me, not being one of those early adopters, but coming in and seeing how everything changed. So that was my instrument until 2001. I purchased my first new stick. And when that thing arrived, it was just night and day. I mean, my old ironwood required a fair bit of effort to get those strings all the way down to the frets. And this new instrument showed up, and the setup was just amazing. Suddenly it's like, it just plays like heaven. It's so nice. And then I think it was 6 or 7 years later, I got the bamboo stick, and it was the same thing all over again. The setup was even better than the last time. And in my newest Wenge instrument, is the one I play all the time now, once again, it's like, how could this be better than the last one? And I don't think guitar players have the opportunity to, first personally know the person that's making the instrument, but watch over the years how the quality of that instrument the quality was always there, but the innovations of, okay, here's what players need. And, I'm sure that Tony Levin was the inspiration behind a lot of it. A touring musician who's going to go everywhere and needs everything to work all the time. Okay, that's a little different problem to solve too. And now the instruments that come out of that shop are just amazing. When it's a joy to play, that you're going to put your time in. And like
100%.
I said, I think you put your time in, things are going to be good. And if you're smiling the whole time you're putting your time in,
then it's not then it's the concept of putting time in. I have this concept that I believe, which is, when time disappears is the most amazing and should be most cherished. Where people go, oh, I don't know where all the time went. I'm like, stop. You should celebrate that, because that's just when you're in the flow, when you're in the zone. And to have an instrument that does that is such an amazing gift, I reckon. It's just that we just don't think about it,
Yeah, I agree that flow state thing. Part of it is software. If I'm in here recording, sometimes you're trying to put the software in a headlock and get it under control. But sometimes you're just tracking, and then I look up at the clock, it's like 4 a.m. No way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good sign.
Yeah. 100%. So what to with you now, mate? You've done a couple of CDs, you've done, are they solo CDs or with a band?
The first one, Arbutus and Jade, is a collaboration with just a fantastic drummer here, Mike McKelko. So that's stick and drums. He does do some hand percussion, but it's mostly stick and kit. And one of the things that, some of the stick players that influenced me early on, I have never recorded anything that I can't just play live.
Yeah.
So that first album, I don't want to say that it was, live to 2-track or anything, but I think all those tunes, we did like 3 takes, and one of those was, the one.
Yeah.
And I just felt really good about that. And then the second CD, I got a little bit interested in two of my favorite stick players, and I've probably got 8 or 10 of them. But, Greg Howard does instrumental stuff that just covers such a range of styles that I like. That was really appealing to me. And he has his stick figure CD. It actually messed with me for quite a while, but those are all 1-take tracks. And Greg was telling me he just recorded them until there was a complete take where he was happy with the sound of both sides and the improv sections that he played. And that stuck in my head. I'm never going to play like Greg Howard, and it's a mistake for me to have that as a goal. But I thought, okay, well, I want to be able to play these tunes live. So that was in my head, like, just play it. And, you know, Bob Culbertson is just such a legend in the stick world. Bob's not a big effects guy. You know, he'll use a freeze pedal, or maybe now every now and then he'll use something, but delay and reverb. And I thought, okay, that's interesting too, because you can hear the instrument. So when I was recording, well, okay, summary of my stick career. I learned how to play by going to seminars. I learned how to play. I learned how to perform by busking for a decade here in Vancouver.
Right. Wow.
And,
okay.
you know, Bob has a long history. Bob still busks in the San Francisco area. Man, after a while, I felt like I could play. You got a float plane 100 feet over your head, no problem. Delivery trucks, seagulls, anything. You know, I can play things now. And Bob just really impressed me with, you don't need a ton of effects. I love effects, and I'm kind of going back there. But for a period of time, it's like, okay, how about nothing on the bass side and delay and reverb on the melody, and that's it. So my second CD is solo Chapman Stick, instrumental. I wrote most of the tunes, but I borrowed 3 tunes from 3 of my favorite stick players, a Tom Greisgraber tune and a Ron Bockerman tune and a Glenn Poorman, who, like me, organizes seminars. He's down in Michigan. And the rest were my own originals. And I kind of like that contrast, that the first CD with Mike the drummer, just there's stuff on there that rocks. There's, you know, we play in 3s, 5s, 7s, and 9s somewhere in there. And, you know, that's really, really fun to play that stuff. And then this other one is just, here's what the instrument sounds like. And it's clearly from, you know, Greg and Bob in the back of my head, but I was busking, and it became very clear to me that people want to know what the instrument sounds like. They know what the distortion pedal sounds like, because you put anything into it, it's going to sound like that. But what if you turn all that off? Like, what does the instrument sound like? So that was my second CD, Watercolor, was just, here's me busking. Here's what I do when I'm busking. And it's pretty clean. So now I'm working on some stuff. I think I'm about, as far as material, about halfway through. So and the pace I'm going, look for me in 12 months. Look for me in 12.
We'll have you back on.
But
just doing
I really want to layer things. I have never really worked with other people who play notes. It's just me and a drummer. And I'm really curious now about, it doesn't matter if I can play these tunes in front of people. That's not my goal anymore. I mean, clearly that's a goal, but for this next album, I just want it to be composition. And if my ear thinks there should be a saxophone here, well, I know saxophone players now. Or if I want a banjo, or, you know, just kind of thinking of stuff that's not necessarily me playing, but also, you know, how instruments might go together. So yeah, maybe you can teach me a little bit about that. I know you've got some background there.
I love that constant evolution and that constant, you know, journey, which is great. So what do you use? Do you tuning wise? Are you classic tuning or match reciprocal, or?
I'm mostly match reciprocal. I've noodled around with the high bass fourth thing. I don't know if you're into that, but take the highest bass string and make it a fourth instead of a fifth.
Yeah.
But I would say match reciprocal. Oh, and I guess the one thing I have not really recorded with, but I'm going to go grab it and show it to you.
Yeah.
This is the, if you have a little baby stick, it's called an alto. Yeah. If you have a little baby stick with 12 strings, this is the SG12 or the stick guitar 12.
Okay.
And the way this is tuned right this minute is a sixth higher than my match reciprocal.
Right. Okay.
But the relationship between the melody side and the bass side is still the same. And this thing, I don't know if you've ever played one of these or not, But when you get to the higher register here, there's a real harp kind of quality to it
Yeah.
that to me sounds quite a bit different from the 36-inch scale sticks.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah, I
had
think this is going to be a part of the new one
a
too.
friend of mine here in Australia has actually got one, brought one over to my studio.
That wouldn't
Bruce.
be Bruce Jacques.
Yeah, Bruce. Yeah, Bruce brought his
Oh yeah,
over. Yeah, and he
yeah.
takes it on
Well,
his ship.
Bruce told me it's easier to get that one on the helicopter.
Yeah, that's what he told
So
me too. Yeah. So, but you know what? I don't have a helicopter, but you know, hey, it's a pretty good sales pitch though.
well, you got to look to the future.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like who knows when you'll be in a helicopter next, right? So, you know. And so, let's talk about your rig. What is your current sort of setup? How do you plug this stuff in? Like, what do you use?
This I had to say, as you know, this is so subjective. I'm not sure that I know any other stick player that has any interest in doing what I'm doing.
Good.
But my whole thing is, I started thinking 2 channels when I got the stick, and I initially started with the big multi-effects gadget for the melody and a multi-effects gadget for the bass side. Both had stereo outputs, so I'm thinking I need a lot of place to plug this in. At the same time, I became friends with a fellow that works for Roland Canada here, and I've been playing through Roland keyboard amps for quite a
Right.
while. And
Yeah.
I don't sing. I know vocalists would be appalled at this, but I just want something that's predictable and pretty flat. And then I want the sound to come from the effects, whatever I'm plugging into, which is generally pedal effects.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
not. I have some rack stuff here, but it never travels with me. So
Sure.
if I'm out playing a gig, it's going to be all pedal board stuff. And I know there's people that aren't going to agree with that, and I appreciate that. But for me, I want the pedals to create the sound that I want because it's easy for me to twiddle the knobs and get it just the way I want. And then I don't really want the amp to be coloring all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to, but I don't want it. I don't want it to be the sound of an amp. And I will say, prior to that, I have a Fender Supersonic, and I will say I love playing the right hand side through that tube amp with the overdrive in the Fender amp. But a lot of gigs that I play are relatively small, and if
Sure.
that's one of the amps I have to lug
Yeah.
around, that's a little bit too much. So
Well, again, if you had a
like
helicopter, it'll be all right because you probably got road crew. But I don't know too many
yeah.
people that got helicopters and road crew. But yeah, well, the keyboard amp though, that's got a horn in it, right? That's a full range amp?
It does. It's a 10. It's a 12. Sorry, a 12
Yeah.
and a little tweeter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's and for a stick player, it has 4 stereo inputs, and then like a low, mid, high EQ, and then Roland's. You can plug 2 of them together so that one of them's left and the other one is right. And for me playing, that's amazing. At a stick seminar, I can put like 12 people into 2 of these Roland amps,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that covers a lot of ground. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some of these atomic powered wedges. They're like a powered, they're a full range powered wedge, and they would run out of my Axifex 3. But I've been sort of playing around with the multiple inputs on the Axifex and then rerouting different things. But I still get back to, I like the bass sound to pretty much just be the bass sound, like going through a nice preamp with a tiny bit of compression, rather than the multi effects. No matter how good it is, for me, it changes the dynamic sort of. It's not just the tone; it changes everything about the bass.
Yeah, I get why I started with that because it was 2 purchases and I was done. But as I started really trying to write and get serious, it's just too limiting. If your gadget does everything, chances are it does it modestly
do anything.
well.
You're really good, yeah.
So it really did kind of point me toward individual pedals that do a specific thing. And I will say, just because you mentioned the bass side, I'm connected with Analog Alien, which is a pedal manufacturer out of Long Island in New York. And they make a thing called the Alien Bass Station, which I could show you. It's actually right here. But it's like an amp modeling and a little bit of EQ, and there's even a little fuzz thing in it. And I sort of use that as a preamp. It gives me the tone that I want. And then if I want to add some delay or something afterward, that's fine. So it's, it's kind of a similar mentality. It's just a smaller gadget that does
Okay.
it.
I'll have to look into that.
And I think I've come to the same thinking on the melody side. As a fan of 70s music, my ear does go more to that warm, mid-rangey sound.
Yeah.
And now for a number of years now, I have a Hughes and Kettner tube preamp pedal. And then I go from the melody side of the stick directly into that. And that's basically my core sound is going through I'm going to say it's a 12AX7 in there, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So then that's sort of my preamp, when I'm playing live as well.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Because I've got even though I've got the Axe-Fx 3 in one of my racks over here, it's probably hard to see it. But at the top, I've got a Boogie JP2C, and then I've got a Bogner Uberschall here. So I always find with my guitars running into the actual amp heads, and then I go into this. It's called a Universal Audio aux, which is it's like a simulator box which goes straight into my rig. And I love the Axe-Fx 3. It's amazing. It does everything, but I still love the sound of plugging into my heads. There's just something about it. And same with the Avalon or the Demeter. It's just, I can't get past the sound of the actual preamp tubes it's I don't know. It's just, for me, it's got a roundness to each note, and each note has definition to each note, rather than when I put it into these multi-effects units, they have a great modeling sound, but the notes tend to sort of blur a little bit together. They don't have the dynamic punch or something, especially when I'm playing fast. But look, that's just me. But
yeah. But I think that's something that in watching a lot of your shows, it's something that comes up pretty frequently. Oh, sorry, I want to mention too. Did I not see in the background of one of your clips you have a VG99?
Yeah, I've got a GR55 and a VG99. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the VG, my bamboo stick has the GK3 on it.
Yeah.
And to me, it really is, I don't want one sound. I want to be able to do a lot of different stuff. Maybe there's a negative to that because I will never have a signature sound. But the stick that I play most of the time has the active pickup on.
Yeah.
The bamboo stick has the GK3, and the VG99 is old. But man, that thing's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of variety in there that doesn't sound like anything else I have in here.
Yeah.
And then just for a bit of variety, this is my oldest busking stick. But I was at Stick Enterprises one day in Emmett's shop, and I saw this pickup laying on his bench, and I'm like, hey, what's that? So this is the stick up on the bass side and the EMG active on the melody side.
Wow.
And Emmett, to me, Emmett is the ultimate minimalist.
Yeah.
There are no knobs on this pickup.
Wow.
So you plug in and play. And I'm like, that's as simple as it gets.
Yeah, that's
so,
awesome.
So I like the stick up has a really different kind of characteristic sound. The active pickup for my ear, I really kind of like that.
Yeah.
And then the GK3 and the VG99, that's completely different. And I will say on the SG12 has an active pickup too, but it's in a different register. So, I have these 4 instruments from Emmett, and to my ear, they all sound different.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with that. I think variety is really what I'm after. So that's amazing to me.
I'm probably like everyone. I'm looking for, how do I make something as simple as possible, but still sounds like most amazing as possible. So it's that constant balance, But well, mate. Well, look, it's just a thrill talking to you, and I just love your energy and love the stories. It's just great. I think it's.
Well, you should come up to the seminar, man.
Oh, look, I would love to come up there. Once COVID, I've traveled a lot, like a hell of a lot. So I've been to Canada a few times, but I'd love to come to see one of your shows or hang out sometime.
Well, we've had folks from obviously North America, South America, and Europe, and Hawaii. But I haven't convinced Bruce to come. I mean, his schedule's pretty crazy, and it would be awesome to have an Aussie come.
Well, it's funny because
I need to mention to you, I have played in your neck of the woods. I came down 3 years ago, and I don't know if you know Conrad Park in Tasmania.
Yeah, I know Conrad. Yep.
Conrad set up a Stick Night Sydney for when I was down, and that was really, really fun. And I played an open mic in Melbourne when I was there. And
well, that's where I'm at. I'm in Melbourne.
It's time for you guys to come this way now.
Yeah, well, look, I lived in the States for 8 years. I lived in Spain. I've lived in Germany and
you
England.
were in New York for a while?
I lived in New York for 5 years in Manhattan, right near the West Village, and then I moved to LA for 3.5 years. That was my US time, but I travel around a lot, you know. But that was more for my software company when I was launching that at the time. But yeah, I got to record over there a lot and play with a lot of different artists and stuff. So yeah, it was a fun time. But yeah, but I love to get back up there. I've been to Canada a few times. I love it. Canada, I actually find Vancouver Island, and I haven't been to Vancouver too much, but the people are very much like Melbourne. I reckon it's Australia and Canada have got a lot of similarities, I think.
We have friends here from Melbourne, and I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I love being in Australia. That was just amazing.
so did you just come down just to do stick gigs, or were you here for?
No, this friend of mine, he lives in Vancouver, but he's from Melbourne
Okay.
and has a place in Sorrento.
Oh,
So it's
perfect.
kind of been this, oh, if you ever get down, you got to come down. So my wife actually had a conference in Melbourne at the university, and we had this offer to go to Sorrento, and it's like, hello, Conrad. Hey, is there anything
Exactly. Yeah.
stick-wise going on in Sydney?
Yeah.
Or yeah, so they were just nice enough to put something together, and I mean, I guess if you know the Australian stick players, uh, some friends of mine from the university here visit Australia frequently over the last several decades, and
Okay.
they were in Adelaide and came home and said, "Oh, you're not going to believe this. We saw this stick player and we bought a CD for you." And that would be Andy Salvanos, if you know Andy.
Yep.
Man, I fell in love with this CD. It's just such an awesome. You can really hear what the stick sounds like on Andy's CD, and just so I was hoping that Andy would be able to make that Sydney show, but
Well, if you ever
logistics
come
just got
down,
in the way.
I'm right on the beach, like Sorrento. I'm in Port Melbourne, but I'm 5 minutes from the centre of the city, but right on the beach. So I'm right in the heart of everything. But if you ever come back down this way,
I just loved. While my wife was at this conference, I just walked around Melbourne, and I just think that's an amazing city.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty
you got to
cool.
love it there.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much, Jim. It's great chatting to you, and I hope I catch up with you somewhere in the world sometime soon, and we can
Thanks,
share some
Finn.
more
Yeah, and
stories.
again, I really got to thank you for doing this. It's a great resource for all of us trying to play.
All right, buddy. Well, I just love meeting great people like you. So thanks for your time.
Excellent. Cheers, Finn.
Take care,
Appreciate
bud.
it.